The title of today's session is Fare Capping, Enticing Cash-Dependent Riders to an Account-Based Fare Systems. However, it's kind of an interesting note, many of the systems that are out there today offering fare capping are actually an older architecture called card-based, which I'll get into in just a moment. So I think it's important that we establish a foundation, and I think the best way to start that foundation is to define what fare capping is. For purposes of today's presentation, we're going to define fare capping as a fare structure or policy that eschews or eliminates prepaid passes in favor of fares that are paid as you go, and then capped once the passenger's account reaches the equivalent value of a pass in total spending. Fare capping is often referred to as the fairest fare, because it eliminates the financial obstacles associated with buying a pass and ensures that passengers always pay the lowest fare for the number of trips they take. Just as a simple example, a passenger would normally have to make the decision, are they going to ride enough to justify the cost of a day pass? Day passes are typically priced at approximately 3 or 4 times the cost of a single ride. And so if in fact it is 3 times, the passenger would logically say, am I going to ride at least 3 times today? If there are free or discounted transfers involved, of course, the math becomes more difficult. The passenger then has to do the math in their head, say, am I going to ride enough times to justify this additional cost that I'm going to have to pay versus just paying cash as I board the vehicle? The math isn't terribly difficult, but it is a process that each passenger has to go through, and one that we've often seen causes the passenger to choose not to buy a prepaid pass and instead to simply pay cash on board. Of course, at the end of the day, they'll do that math again, determine whether or not they did pay more than what they were expecting to pay, slap themselves on the head because they realized they either purchased a pass and didn't ride enough, or should have bought a pass and rode it often enough that would have justified the additional cost, but would have ultimately given them a discount for the course of the day, or in the course of longer fare capping, the week or the month. So what are we going to cover today in the session? First, we'll quickly review how it works. Fare capping can be implemented in a variety of ways. So we're going to explore the different techniques that are used. Also, there are different models for how the process will work. We're going to cover the most commonly used models. Second, we're going to cover what are the impacts. Fairest fare, transit rewards. These are just a few of the nicknames that are given to fare capping to help explain its benefits to passengers. We'll take a quick look at those benefits and those that accrue to the agencies that are implementing this new fare structure. Third, we're looking at who is using. There are agencies across the United States and a few outside the US that have implemented fare capping, some with limited success. Most are in the fairly early stages. However, all of them have made a commitment to use this approach, either in addition to the prepaid passes that they're offering, or in some cases as a comprehensive replacement for the prepaid passes that they have offered in the past. And then finally, we'll cover why should you consider it. If you're a transit agency or a consultant helping out a transit agency, or potentially an integrator thinking about offering this as a potential solution, we're going to cover why it makes sense for passengers, and why it makes sense for the agency to head down this path. With that, let's get into the specifics of how it works. I'm going to give you an example using images from our client in Shreveport, Louisiana, an agency called Sportram. They've actually implemented a variety of fare capping rules, but the most basic one is replacement of day passes. Their base fare for an adult passenger happens to be $1.25. Now, they've also got some free and discounted transfers, which I'm going to ignore for the sake of this quick illustration. So the passenger boards a bus. They are a full fare adult passenger, and so the system will then charge them $1.25 against the stored value in the passenger's account. Passenger hops on a second bus, and they will then be charged once again the full rate of $1.25. We're now up to $2.50 in total fares for the passenger for this specific service day. Passenger hops on yet a third bus. In this case, because the total fares for the passenger are now going to exceed $3 if we charge them $1.25, the system will only charge them 50 cents, bringing the cumulative fares paid to $3, then thus reaching the fare cap for the day. In our case, the system will actually, or the reader will actually display to the passenger that they have reached the fare cap. And if the passenger then boards a fourth bus, rather than charging anything at all, that ride will actually be free. And same with any subsequent rides for the rest of the day. If this particular agency had implemented weekly capping or monthly capping, once the passenger reaches the incremental amounts associated with weekly passes or with monthly fares or caps, the system will work exactly the same way, charging them the incremental amount to reach the maximum and then giving them free rides for the remainder of that calendar period. So what are the impacts associated with the implementation of fare capping? I think the most common thing that is true for all passengers when they are boarding any bus or at least considering riding on any public transit vehicle, the considerations for them are varied. However, for those that are most economically challenged, it can often be the choice between getting a pass or buying lunch that day. Certainly, even for the most heavy commuters, the decision, it goes through a process, and it's a mental process where you have to do a calculation of things like, well, how many transfers am I going to need to get to my destination, and how many transfers will I need over the course of the day or the week, depending on what I'm doing the calculation for. I also have to consider, well, what is the cost per ride if I actually just pay cash? Or if I buy the pass, what's the difference in the rate on a per ride basis? Then I actually have to consider, well, am I going to be on vacation this week or this month? Am I going to have a lunch appointment that's going to cause me to potentially ride more today? Or in fact, am I going to get a ride home from a friend that's going to make it so I don't have to pay that additional fare later in the day, et cetera, et cetera. All of these things are considerations. And of course, you get down to the last bullet points there is, do I have enough cash to actually afford to buy the pass, for the day, for the week, or for the month? And then I must also consider, well, what are the other expenses that I've got to pay for? Do I have the means? Do I have the funds to actually shell out what may in some cases be a substantial amount? Some agency monthly passes, for instance, are over $100. So do I have $100 extra that I can lay down right now in return for the discounted rides that I'm hoping to get from this pass? All of these are considerations for the passenger in a model where prepaid passes are really the only way to get a substantive discount on the cost per ride. According to data in the 2019 APTA Factbook, there are over 1,360 agencies in the US today providing some form of fixed route service. The vast majority of those are offering some form of discounted daily or monthly pass to incentivize passenger use. In fact, if you look at the history of passes being offered in the US, you'll find that it is that mechanism, the issuance of a prepaid pass with substantive discounts on a per ride basis, that caused ridership to increase substantially back in the time frame when those instruments were originally introduced. While it's a great option for commuters, the upfront investment and limited sales venues, particularly most agencies only offer sales through a ticket window or perhaps a few grocery stores in the neighborhood, it tends to be very difficult for ridership among the poorest segments to be able to get to the location to actually purchase the pass, let alone to be actually able to afford it. And so what we typically find in almost any agency, that those riders that are paying cash are among the poorest. And unfortunately, it also means that those passengers are paying the highest amount on a per ride basis. One of the saddest truisms that I found working in the transit industry for now well over a decade is that passengers often have to ride the bus to go buy a pass so that they can ride the bus the next day. Once fare capping is introduced, a lot of that decision making goes away. If you think about the fact that no matter how much you ride, the agency can guarantee to you that you will always pay the lowest rate per ride, then making the choice even becomes much easier, but you also don't have to worry about all those other considerations of do you have enough money and can you pay your other bills, etc. By just putting a few dollars of stored value into account, potentially sufficient enough to cover the rides for reaching the daily cap, you may not in fact ride that amount and therefore would have a few dollars left over for the next day. And so there's little risk to the passenger to make that decision versus buying a pass and then finding that potentially the pass gets lost or they simply don't ride enough to make it worthwhile from a financial standpoint. Fewer rides for the passenger simply means that funds are available for tomorrow, as I just described. It also means that if you ride more, you don't have to worry because you're not going to have to pay more. Your rides are going to be capped, again, whether it's for the day or for the week or the month, depending on the rules that the agency has employed. And most important for the passenger, and therefore one of the easiest selling points for fare capping, is that you can assure the passenger that they're always going to pay their lowest fare. In addition, there are other impacts to consider. Some of these, of course, may be negative impacts, particularly for the agency. For the short term, one of the positive impacts for passengers and for the agency is that your fare policy can be greatly simplified. Assuming that you eliminate the prepaid passes, I simply don't offer them anymore, you're going to have a much simpler policy. Policy will simply be each ride costs X. If you ride more than Y number of times, your fares are going to be capped over this time period. Fairly simple and easy for most passengers to understand. Second thing, of course, you'll eliminate the cost and the operational effort associated with managing pass inventory and distributing that pass inventory. If in fact you are relying on some retail locations to distribute your passes, there's probably a mechanism you have in place to get those passes to them, for them to order them in the first place, to charge them for those passes, and in many cases, because passes are often calendar-based, meaning they're good only for a particular calendar month and rarely sold after the middle of the month, there's a process for going back and getting the unsold inventory back from your retailer locations, all of which are costs and, of course, time-consuming efforts, and all of which can be completely eliminated with the idea of launching a fare capping program instead. It is likely that there's going to be a temporary reduction in prepaid fare revenue, and particularly if you offer fare capping over longer periods of time, meaning week or month or longer. Simple fact of the matter is that passengers are making the decision today, usually in the last 5 calendar days of each month, to either buy their monthly pass for the next month or not. Many, of course, are simply buying it out of habit or simply because they believe they're probably going to ride enough to warrant the cost of that pass. As I mentioned a few minutes ago, buying a pass for the month in the middle of the month simply doesn't make any financial sense. And so it rarely will happen where a passenger will want to make that purchase. So they're all obligated, at least emotionally and financially, to make that purchase within the last few days of the previous month or the first few days of the month in which the pass is valid. What that also means is that you've got long queue times. Passengers are going to pile up at your ticket windows in order to buy those passes, and so you'll inevitably have long queues of people waiting in line to purchase their passes around that time period every month infinitum. We also believe, however, that you may find that over time, that reduction in prepaid fare revenue actually dissipates, if not disappears altogether. And the reason for it is because as passengers become more comfortable with the system and as they recognize that the agency is always giving them the lowest fare, what we've seen in systems that have implemented these types of strategies is that the amount of stored value that is being added to accounts grows and grows over time. The average purchases grows over time. And in fact, it may not completely offset the tens, if not hundreds of dollars associated with a prepaid pass. It certainly will do a great deal towards reducing the initial impacts that you'll see when you first implement a fare capping program. I will also be honest with you, I don't think anyone, at least that I'm aware of, has done any exhaustive studies on what the direct impacts were at the first year, second year, third year associated with fare capping, primarily because a lot of the programs haven't been around that long, or they simply didn't have decent data what their prepaid pass program looked like to be able to make an honest assessment. There are a few that are working on that now, but we probably won't see the results from them, even the preliminary results, for at least a few more months. Long term, you're going to see almost certainly increased purchases of stored value, as I already mentioned, higher average purchases amounts, and potentially increased ridership. One of the clear things that we find when surveys are done of passengers or people who don't ride public transit on a regular basis is that the fare policies are confusing. They're not sure how much they're supposed to pay. What they've heard is they have to have exact change, and a lot of other barriers that simply make it difficult and potentially confusing to ride. By making a policy simple, simply saying it's always X dollars to ride and we're going to guarantee that you never pay more than you should, it makes it a simpler choice for passengers and also an easy one for them to do the calculation to confirm from those that in fact this is the lowest cost any type of transportation that they might choose. Finally, there's a chance that we're going to entice some of the choice riders to ride more often and potentially choose public transit versus some of the other options that are available out there. Who's using it today? Well, there are a variety of agencies. In fact, I'll be honest with you, I was a bit surprised to see the number of names and the disparate locations where they are. I'm focusing primarily on the US here, although there's definitely some international agencies listed here as well. The first, in fact, is one example of that. That's the Oyster program launched by Transport for London in London, England. Oyster was one of the first to implement fare capping. They did it with stored value, with passengers using that. They later, many years later, in fact, implemented an open payment scheme where passengers can use their contactless bank cards or mobile wallets to pay fares, and they have also introduced capping for those open payments as well, with pretty significant success. Another program a little bit later from that was the Q card program with Houston Metro around the 2007 timeframe. In parallel with that, the Clipper program launched. It was the replacement in San Francisco for the original TransLink program. That program also offers fare capping for some of the agencies that are participating there, introduced roughly in the 2007-2008 timeframe. Following several years later was the Opal program in Sydney, also a stored value program, introduced fare capping back in, again, 2012 timeframe. And then last on that list on the left-hand side of the chart that you're looking at is the DART program. DART is actually in Dublin. The Dublin program launched in 2013. And the interesting thing about all of the programs I just mentioned is each and every one of them are the old architecture, what the industry now calls a card-based system, where value is actually written to the card and deducted each time that the passenger boards a bus or a train. And so all of these are based on that older architecture. If you look on the right-hand side, and I won't go through all of these, at least not in depth, you'll see that there's a number of them, and they're quite stacked. And the reason is because they all implemented within the last really 3 calendar years. The HOP program, which is the program for TriMet in Portland, Oregon, launched in the 2017 timeframe with fare capping and also, by the way, with open payment acceptance as well. We have 3 programs launched in 2018 and 19 that are part of our client base, Sportran in Shreveport, Louisiana, GreenLink in Greenville, South Carolina, and the Piedmont Authority for Regional Transportation, or PART, in Greensboro, North Carolina. Above that is the GoPass program for the Dallas area rapid transit system in Dallas, Texas. Above that is the Connect program for Connecticut Transit. The Connect program for the I went blank. For the Sacramento Regional Program in Sacramento, California. Above that is the GO program in Connecticut, and above that is the Flamingo program in Florida. And planning and very near implementation is Indigo. They purchased a new fare collection system a couple of years ago and are planning to launch their system later this year or early next year. And then following that will be Portland Metro in Portland, Maine. And of course, the New York MTA, the largest transit agency in North America, they are beginning the rollout of their new Omni system and planning to incorporate fare capping into it sometime in the next 2 or 3 years. So why should an agency consider the implementation of fare capping other than the obvious things that I've already mentioned? Well, first, to repeat a little bit, we're talking about simplification of fares. This is a goal for most of our clients and many of our prospective clients and others that I dealt with as a consultant. Often I see an agency with dozens of passes. One of our recent clients has 84 different passes that they're offering to passengers. And needless, it's confusing. It's difficult for staff to manage all of that paper, difficult for them to even pick the right pass when a passenger is buying a pass, and they often have mistakes made and the wrong pass is sold to the wrong type of passenger, and they end up having to do refunds, etc. I mention all of this because passengers, like all of us, are seeking simplification. They're seeking something that they can easily understand and grasp. There's quite honestly not much something simpler than saying, no matter what you pay, it will be the lowest fare based on your ridership. Again, an easy message to understand and certainly an easy one to convey to your ridership. You can also eliminate those paper passes. As I described previously, you're not going to have to worry about the printing and the sorting and the storing and the security associated with those paper passes, let alone about establishing and maintaining a broad distribution network. We do, of course, need to get that stored value sold, but there's some other options available for that. When we're talking about stored value, we're talking about pure digital products, and so we no longer have to worry about physical media that has to be distributed anymore. We also don't have to worry about things like passengers losing their passes or those long queues associated with the calendar-based passes that I mentioned previously, something which is common to the vast majority of agencies throughout North America. One of the things that my company Delerrok did is an extensive study on all the agencies throughout North America, at least all that we could find information on. And what we found is about 89% of all the agencies in North America offer some type of a prepaid pass, the vast majority either offering a day pass or a monthly pass or both. I believe, and several agencies have at least confirmed this theory, that the main reason the calendar-based pass is used is because they don't have any form of electronic fare collection system, and simply printing July 2019, or in this case, August 2019 on a pass is something that's easy to understand for the passenger and easy to understand for the bus operator or the train operators that are coming by to validate those fares, or as the passenger is boarding a bus. And so it's simplicity in that case, but those are physical medium. And so with the movement towards a fully digital store value program or potentially an open payments program, we could eliminate those responsibilities and those costs. By the way, there's a side benefit, but an important one. I've talked now to probably 60 or 70 different bus operators throughout North America, and all of them have shared a common story with me. And that common story is that bus operators do not like to touch things that the passenger is carrying. And with some reasonable expectations associated with that. They simply do not like to have to touch things with a passenger. And when you've got a paper flash pass or a pass that has to be punched or one that has to be swiped through a terminal and the bus operator has that responsibility, we're forcing them to take that very action that they wish to avoid. Moving to an electronic model, of course, will eliminate that need, but fare capping further eliminates it by moving to a single model, where there is no paper media anymore, at least none associated with stored value, and one where the passenger automatically gets the benefits that they're entitled to based on their ridership. Third main point here is that you're going to encourage choice riders, as mentioned or suggested previously. While fare capping will definitely benefit primarily your core commuters, what we're also seeing is that choice riders are likely to understand this model, and because they're often making the choice based on environmental reasons, et cetera, we simply give them one more reason to choose public transportation over the other options that are available, including riding their own car. Let's not also forget that for passengers in the lowest economic strata, the typical choice may be between lunch and a bus ride. Capping removes many of the financial barriers associated with higher price passes and eliminates that mental calculation that passengers have to do in deciding whether they should pay a fare on the bus or get a more expensive prepaid pass. And last but not least, it does what I think is perhaps the most important thing, and that is reward those passengers who use your system the most. And the reward is, we're going to guarantee to you that you will always pay the lowest fare. Even the most savvy commuters will make the mistake, and I say that in quotation marks, of purchasing a pass and forgetting after activating that pass or after launching that pass that they're going to be on vacation for a week, or that they've got some seminar downtown that will not require them to ride public transit for a period of time, and they're therefore diminishing the value of that pass. And they'll slap themselves in the forehead thinking, I should have remembered that before I purchased and used this pass. That goes away, those issues go away, but most important, again, you're rewarding your most reliable, most loyal passengers by ensuring that they will never pay a fare greater than what they would have paid if they had had a pass in their hand. What I'd like to do to wrap up my presentation and to move into the Q&A session is show a quick video done by one of our clients, one I mentioned previously, the Piedmont Authority for Regional Transportation in Greensboro, North Carolina. They have taken an approach of calling their program Part Rewards. And it ties to that theme where you are rewarding passengers for their ridership. The more they ride, the greater the reward. Fact of the matter is, Part is not actually offering any more discounts than they would have offered if the passenger had bought a pass. So the passenger themselves will pay no more than what they were doing previous to the launch of the fare capping program, which just started on August 1st, just a few days ago. So let me show that video to you.
The Part Rewards program provides special benefits to Part riders who pay for their daily trips using stored value through Part's TouchPass mobile and smart card system. No more need to purchase a pass up front. Just pay your fare as you ride, and once you spend $5 per day, $2.50 for discount riders, or $80 per month, $40 for discount riders, the TouchPass system will cap your account and you won't have to pay for any additional rides that day or for the rest of the month. Here's how it works. Passengers load money known as stored value into their TouchPass account. You can load anywhere from $5 to $100 at a time. As you ride, the TouchPass system deducts money from the account for each trip. Don't worry, transfers are free. Once you have ridden 2 times and paid a total of $5 that day, the TouchPass system will let you ride fare-free for the rest of the day. That means whether you ride 3 times or 10 times that day, you won't pay more than $5. Then starting at the beginning of the calendar month, TouchPass will start counting how many times you pay to ride. Once you have ridden 32 times and paid a total of $80, the TouchPass system will let you ride fare-free for the rest of the month. For someone who rides to and from work every day, after 16 days, no matter how many more times you ride, you won't pay any more that month. The Part Rewards program is only available to passengers that use stored value through the TouchPass system, because the technology automatically counts the number of trips and payments you make to confirm whether you reached your cap. Make sure you fully set up and register your TouchPass account to ensure you can take advantage of the Part Rewards program. For more information, Visit partnc.org/touchpass or call 336-883-7278.